Throughout the process of making the latest installment in the Planet of the Apes franchise, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, dozens of artists were brought on board the project to create concept art of what certain scenes in the movie could look like, as well as various other ideas that fit into the world and story being told. As happens on all big franchise films, many of those ideas never quite made it off the page or were used but altered significantly from their original design to the film's final cut. Since the film's release back in May of this year, there have been tons of concept art released online for fans to see what did and didn't make it into the film, and I wanted to go through and examine the most interesting and exciting of them all. If you like what I do here and want to show your support, be sure to hit the like button on this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so that you can stay up to date on all things apes. Enjoy the video. And welcome to Ape Nation, your #1 source for all things Planet of the Apes on YouTube. My name is Josh, and today I wanted to take a look at some of the concept art from Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. There have been so many pieces released, some of which I've shared here on Ape Nation and even talked about briefly, and while a lot of it is stuff that didn't make it into the final film, I think it's still really cool to look at alternate designs and shots and get an idea of the different version of this movie that could have been. And because there is so much of that concept art to get through, let's not waste any more time and get right to it. I will say I am not going to be going over every single piece of released concept art in this video because there are, I believe, well over 100, if not more, images that we've seen released from the concept artists throughout the year. That being said, I've collected a handful that I think are the most interesting and exciting to discuss, and those are the ones we will be talking about here. If you want to see even more that I'm not going to be talking about here, I've put links with credits to all the artists involved down in the description below, so if you are interested in seeing more of the art that I'm not talking about here, as well as seeing more of all the individual artists' work, you can check that out down in the description below. So there are two categories that I'm going to be diving into here. The first is character designs, and the other one will be alternate scenes. So getting into those character designs, I'm going to be starting off with this one right here, which is an alternate design for the character of Raka, who is of course the orangutan played by Peter Macon in the film. There are two real main differences versus what we get in the final cut. The big one, of course, is giving him a bearded look. Now, this is something that I think is kind of really cool, and we're going to see more of this in some other character designs that we'll talk about in a minute, but the bearded, older, kind of Gandalf style look for Raka, I think is actually really cool. I don't know if it would have worked for the style of character that Raka is, because Raka is such a sweet, compassionate, kind-hearted character, and I think giving him that more rugged, epic Gandalf style look could have made him a bit too intense, could have made him a bit too menacing in a way, but I could also see a world where it works. And the other major difference here is more just the clothing he is wearing. Again, it plays into that old wizard style of look. It has a very tribal look to it, and especially giving him a walking stick as well. I think this is all some really cool stuff, and it could have worked for the character. I personally prefer what we got because I think it's more fitting for who the character is as a person, but I do think the design as a whole would have been really cool, and maybe we could see it used again for another orangutan character down the line. Next up, we're going to talk about the character of Proximus Caesar. Now, this is the character that I think that has the most versions that were created for him through concept art. Some of these look more or less very similar to what we got with him sitting on his throne with some sort of Roman style armor. One of them included him having a mask, which is similar to the mask that all of his followers are wearing. I think it would have been interesting to have him have a mask, and in this concept art, he's the only one wearing that mask. So having his apes be the one that don't wear one, he wears one, it is an interesting play, but I think the way they had it where his followers are the one that wander around wearing masks and he has his face revealed with a crown works better for who the character is and what he's trying to do. And then of course we just have alternate versions of what the crown looked like, and for the most part they all look relatively similar. There's another design they had with more of a bald look with a beard, and personally I'm not a big fan of this one. I think it could have been very menacing, but personally I don't like it. I just think it looks a bit too almost human, and I don't think having a chimp character that almost models himself after very human-like villain designs would have worked for this film. And of course, tying it all together, you have this image here with Proximus with a crown that's very similar to what we got in the final film, with a more scarred look and the full beard and the big massive size. I think a version of this could have been really cool, and almost in a way reminds me of a character from like Lord of the Rings, again going back to that Gandalf Gandalf reference. And I don't know if it would have worked, but of all the designs I've seen of Proximus, this is the one that I think at least I would have been curious to see the most. I think the version that we got of him in the movie probably was for the best, again, going into the kind of character he is, because I think for Proximus, you need him to look at least somewhat, not empathetic, but like someone you can actually have a conversation with and talk to. If he's just this almost gross looking, scarred, elderly looking chimp that has this big body and sits on his throne and has this long beard, I don't know if you would be able to have him and Noah have a conversation and have it be believable that maybe Proximus actually is in a way right. Whereas here I just see a character that is obviously a bad guy, obviously evil from the start, whereas the Proximus we got, I think there's at least room for some nuance there, and I don't think you have that here. But still, I think it could have been interesting. And now here we have some more concept art of character designs. Right here you have a design of, I believe, is the character Lightning, which kind of follows the same trajectory as the Proximus Caesar concept art, you know, with some of them a little more scarred, a couple with beards. I think actually this is a character I would have liked to seen them try a beard with. I think the version they gave us was great. I love his design, but if there was any character that I think they could have maybe pulled the beard and look off of, I think either Lightning or Silva would have been it, and I would have been really curious to see them try that with Lightning. So I will say, of all the concept art I've seen so far, this is the one where I go, I think they actually could, if not should have gone with one of these alternate designs. Personally, I'd say the one with the scar on his eye and the bearded look is the one that I ideally think looks the best, but still I do like the design that they ultimately gave us in the final cut of the film. And then here we have a bunch of alternate designs for the followers of Proximus Caesar masks, a couple of which are pretty much identical to the ones we got in the movie, but some are a bit different. Of course, the one on the top left is a bit more broken, more like a helmet. Same with another one on the top of the screen. And then you have the one on the far right on the top that is kind of a mix of those two with the one we actually got. And then on the bottom of the screen, you have a bunch that have these different jagged designs that I think are really cool looking. I actually like those designs a lot. I don't know if they would have been best for the movie, but I think they're really cool. I think maybe in the future it would be cool to bring them back, but ultimately I think the design they went with works best for this story that they were telling in this world they were creating. I think one thing to keep in mind is that apes are still not in their fully evolved state, and so having them come up with super complex designs, I mean, I'm not saying some of these more jagged and shapely designs are super complex, but compared to more of a blank slate, just two eye holes look with some war paint, that is much more representative of where apes are in the world at this point than something that's a bit more evolved than they would be at this time. So that's why I think it's probably for the best where they went with these masks. And then you have more mask designs for the character of Silva. Of course, you have one with it's just him and it looks exactly like he does in the movie. And then you have a couple of the other gladiator style masks and armor. I think the one second to the right is the one that most closely resembles the one we got in the final cut of the movie. The other two I think are cool, but also think cover up a little too much of the character's head and torso and upper body. So I personally am more of a fan of what we got, but I do think it would be cool to see different variations of armor like this in a future film. So maybe they could bring something like that back in the next movie or two. And then finally, you have this design here, which I actually have no idea which character it's supposed to be. If I had to guess off the top of my head, it would be some sort of alternate Proximus Caesar design or a design for Noah's father, Koro, or it could have been a completely just random character that they just designed and wanted to fit in somewhere. I don't really know. Either way, I do think the character design as a whole is really cool. It actually is very reminiscent of something we would have gotten in Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes, which, as much as I don't like the movie that much, I do think a lot of those designs were really interesting and really different and unique. And so bringing a little bit more of that flavor into it, I think as long as it's within reason and actually servicing the story and fits within the world, would be really exciting. So this is a design that I think is a bit out there for where we are in the universe at this point, but I could see it working down the line. And now moving on from the character designs, and of course, like I said, there are some others that you can check out in the links I've provided down in the description, but those are just the ones that I found the most interesting and the ones that I really felt like talking about. And so now I'm going to move on to alternate scenes. And so right here, first one I wanted to talk about is a sequence in which you have what looks like some sort of army of Proximus's apes on horses, not just on horses, but the horse is actually wearing war paint, which is something we didn't get in the final cut of the movie, and I think that would have been really cool. I'm not sure what this scene would have been or where in the movie it would have fit, but I think the idea of an ape army going up against some sort of enemy is always fun and is always exciting, especially in a much more organized gladiatorial style like this. So I don't know what this scene was gonna be. Maybe they'll save it for another movie. Maybe it's a scene that they just couldn't fit into the story for budget reasons or for time reasons or just for story reasons in general, but whatever this scene was going to be, it looks like it could have been epic, and I would really love to see it. I also just love the shield design on top of the ape's armor, who's riding on the horse. I love the big staff. All the things going on here look really epic, and so this is a sequence that, for one reason or another, did not make it into the film. For all I know, it could have just been a design that someone came up with and was never really intended to be a specific scene, but it's still something I think would be really exciting to finally get in one of these movies, because we are now at a point where apes can have big, massive armies and be riding into battle on horseback. We got shades of that in War for the Planet of the Apes, but it was a much more primitive version. Here, I think it would be much more evolved, and it could be much more fun and much more exciting to see something like that. So I hope we get a scene like this down the line. I don't know if we will. I don't know what the context will be, but I'd love to see it played out in a future film. And so now I have a handful of images here that I want to get into, because what these next 4 or 5 images really show me is that at one point, at least maybe I'm wrong, but it seems to me that at one point in the development process, it was just going to be Noah and May on this journey, and Anaya and Suna and Raka were not involved. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but you have a shot here of what appears to be Noah and May going on this journey throughout the worlds of Proximus's kingdom. You have another shot here of them in that arena environment that you see Noah riding his horse past soon after his village is burned down. And then you have another shot here of the two of them again going on their mission at the end of the film into Proximus's vault to get the SATCOM key for May. And again, it's just the two of them. And then finally, you have a shot here of Noah and May hiding behind a rock, waiting to sneak past a group of apes. It really appears to me that at some point in this movie, Noah and May were going to be going on this journey alone. Whether Raka was involved or not, I'm not really sure. Maybe he was involved in a different capacity, and whether Suna and Anaya were going to be involved in a different way, again, I'm not really sure. But I think having just Noah and May going on this journey alone throughout the entire movie would have made for a much different dynamic between the two. It actually probably would have given us more time to see the two actually evolve their relationship and get to understand each other and know each other more. I do think that the way they handled it in the movie gave it much more of that traditional coming of age adventure feel, and it definitely added a bit more excitement to the film with having your mentor character and your two best friends type of character, one being a love interest, one being more almost comedic relief in a way. But I do think having the story play out differently and having it just be the two of them going on all of these journeys together could have been interesting, and it could have been just as exciting, if not a much more smaller scale and more drama filled story. I don't know if that's what we would have gotten, but that's definitely something I think it could have lent itself to. Ultimately, I do love that we had Suna, Noah, and Anaya together, and I love that Raka went on the journey with them, because Raka is, I think, a fan favorite of this movie, and he's one of my personal favorite parts of the movie. And again, I've talked about it ad nauseum, but I love the trio of Noah, Suna, and Anaya. And so while I do think it would have been very cool to see these two as a pairing just alone for the majority of the movie, I think what we got probably is going to benefit the character of Noah, his story, and where we go from here a bit more. So I think what they ended up going with works a bit better than what could have been here, but maybe I'm wrong. And then here we have something that honestly I am at a complete loss for words. I don't really know what this is. My guess is that it is a human in some sort of camouflage to avoid being hunted, or maybe it's some sort of statue. I can't really tell, but specifically with this design, I want to know what you guys think down in the comments, because I really have no idea what this could have been. My gut tells me it's just a human in camouflage. I wonder if at any point there were more humans that were going to be involved in the story. I wonder if the wild humans element was going to play a bigger role, and maybe that's why this was drawn for it, but I really don't know. So I want to know what you guys think of this one down below. And then this design here of what appears to be Noah riding into battle with Eagle's son by his side and on a horse. I think this could have played into that battle sequence that I discussed a little bit earlier. I do wonder if at one point there was going to be more of a ape versus ape war breaking out with more of an actual physical battle before it ultimately became taking Proximus down with all of the eagles. I don't know at what point that changed or if it ever changed, but it definitely appears that maybe at some point it shifted from a big third act climactic battle into a smaller scale thing that we got, which probably came down to budget, if not trying to create more of a focused story for Noah. But I do think it would have been exciting to see Noah leading the apes into battle similar to this, if not just being a part of it. Maybe that's something they're going to save for the next film or the third film, and if so, I think that's actually probably the right call, and I hope it's something that they bring back for a later film, because I definitely think that it could play into Noah's ever-evolving arc as he grows as a leader. And then next we have this scene right here, and this is one of the more interesting ones that I found, and as you can see, it depicts May being chained, and it makes me wonder, what was May's original story going to be? Was she always going to be more of an ally to Noah? Was she always always going to have the role that she did, or was there at any point where Noah just didn't like her and didn't trust her for the entire movie? I really want to know how far that extended, because it seems like it extended a lot farther here than it did in the actual movie, because at no point is she chained up. At no point is she kind of treated like a slave by Noah in the movie that we got. So I think this would have been a really interesting dynamic paired with just Noah and May going along by themselves on the journey, if that was the original plan. And so I'm curious at which point after this moment Noah would have gained her trust and begun the story with her. But of course, as with all this concept art, no one really knows for sure. So I think this is one of the more curious pieces of concept art that's been released. It's one of my personal favorites just because of the imagery and because of the questions that go through your head with it, and because it makes you wonder, what was May's character originally going to be? Who was she going to be? Where could she be going? I'm not 100% sure, and as someone who's really grown to appreciate the character of May, it makes me all the more curious where her evolution is going to go from here, and also just what the evolution of creating her was before we got the version of her that we did. And we're coming up on some of the final pieces here, but this one I thought was really, again, curious, and makes me wonder if there were more scenes that were originally written that didn't make it to the screen, which of course is always the case, but this is one that I thought would have been really cool, and it's seeing more of the wild humans out and roaming, and this would have been a night scene. So I'm curious what this would have been, how it would have played into the story. It looks very much like almost a horror type scene. Like, would it have been like a surprise attack of the humans on Noah and Raka and May? Would it have been something else? I don't really know, but the imagery alone is very eerie. Having more of that kind of imagery could have brought a bit more edge to the movie that I feel like some people maybe wanted more of compared to what we got with Dawn and War. But of course, it did not make it for various reasons. We'll probably never know why, but it would be cool to see a sequence like this brought into the Planet of the Apes franchise later down the line. And then finally, the last piece that I wanted to talk about is the one that I think is the most exciting and most interesting, and especially for diehard old school fans of the franchise, the most nostalgic, if you will, is right here with Noah looking at the remains of the Statue of Liberty. This is the one that of course caught my attention the most. I think it would have been really cool to see this in the movie. I of course understand probably why they didn't. Maybe they want to save that for a later moment, maybe find a way to link it to the original movie, and this would not have been it. This probably would have just been a little throwaway moment, but it's still cool to see that it's a design that the people working on the movie were thinking about, and it's one that was at the very least considered in some ways. And so I think it's really cool to see it here, actually get a full image of it. And it's something that actually made me wonder about, which I hadn't really thought about up until I saw this picture, is that when you look at the original shot from 1968's Planet of the Apes, when you actually really think about it, it makes not a lot of sense that 2,000 years later, the Statue of Liberty is still standing in mostly one piece, whereas here it's completely covered in foliage, and on first glance it's not completely recognizable. And so I think it actually makes a lot more sense logistically for the Statue of Liberty to be in a position like this as opposed to what we get in the 1968 movie. But of course, you know, it was a movie from 1968 and it worked for the story and it worked for the visuals of the story in that moment, and so obviously things like that don't really matter there. So it's cool to see a version that is a bit more in line with how reality would go here in this piece of art. Again, it's something that maybe they could bring back in a future movie and maybe have it play a bit more of a bigger role, kind of similarly to how it was used in the 1968 movie. I doubt they'll actually try to recreate that moment ever, but it would be interesting to have it play a bit more of a significant role than just be a little throwaway moment. But there's a dozen different ways they could bring it back, and I'm sure that one day they will, and I am looking forward to when they eventually do. So guys, what do you think of all of these alternate designs and moments from Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes? While there are definitely some things here that I think could have been equally, if not more exciting, I think what we ultimately ended up getting was for the most part the best version of what the movie could have been. But maybe you think differently. Do you think that any of these characters should have had different designs? Would you have liked to see Noah and May going on their mission alone instead, or seen any of the other scenes here played out differently? I want to know all of your thoughts down in the comments below. Thank you so much for checking out today's video here on Ape Nation. If you liked this video, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so that you can stay up to date on all things apes. I'll catch you in the next one, so until then, goodbye.